Welcome back, Shop Rats. It's a Talk About It Tuesday, and we're doing a little bit of a rewind even as I back up. Today, we're going to talk about why I have chosen the cars that I have. It was a great question by channel viewer and good friend, Mark. So let's talk about it. I'm Mike.
This is My Cars Shop.
In one of the episodes this past weekend, we were working on the Stitches Challenger, and my good friend Mark asked the question, why did I choose the Stitches Challenger? And it got me to thinking, I don't know if I've shared the reason I picked any of the cars. Now I'm going to focus on Stitches, but there are reasons for all of them, and most of those reasons are pretty much a common denominator. The reasons may surprise you. Most of them were not intentional. They were just good deals and cars that I happen to like. I mean, when it comes down to it, I have fairly eclectic automotive taste. I'm mostly Mopar, but I love fat fender Fords. I like old tin like the Oakland and Model A's and stuff like that. And so, anything of that vintage or in that wheelhouse, I like. Now, I've certainly had vehicles of other brands, and I'm not just talking about dailies, but although I am driving a Mini Cooper right now, but I definitely have very eclectic automotive. I guess eclectic is like a summary of eclectic automotive. So I have eclectic tastes. But let's focus on Stitches to start. First of all, let me say that I cannot think of a time in my life where I have ever said, ooh, I really want one of those classic or muscle cars, except maybe for the 47, and even that was a compromise, but we'll come back to that in a bit. But I did know that I always wanted an E-body, which is a 70 to 74 Plymouth Barracuda or Dodge Challenger, or as people so affectionately call them, Cudas and Challies.
That'll make some heads explode, especially if they have a posse.
I think I did share this on an episode recently that I've always wanted a Cuda. And when my son was building the Charger, he kind of wanted a Challenger. And so we were always talking back and forth. And he said, I would like a Cuda. That would be okay. I'd prefer a Challenger. And I always said, I would like a Challenger, but I prefer a Cuda, and that would be okay. And, well, I didn't fall. The Challie Stitches fell directly in my lap through a good friend of mine. I was in town one day, and I was talking to him sitting on the side of the curb. He had driven his orange Duster to town, and we were just chit-chatting, and I said, I'm kind of thinking about looking for another project. He said, what about that Challenger I've got? Boing! Challenger? What Challenger? He said, well, yeah, I got one from such and so a junkyard. It was in the pile there, and the owner's a good friend of mine. And I said, hey, why don't you pull that out of there and bring it to my place? So I got it. I said, well, what kind of money are you looking for? He said, first of all, it's completely stripped. It's bad. I didn't even know it's fixable. I said, well, what kind of money are you looking for? He said, well, what I paid for it, scrapyard price, $300. I am all about the good deal. My son happened to be home at the time, and he was actually working out of my office in town. And I went and grabbed him. I said, come on, let's go take a look at a Challenger. Challenger? I said, come on, let's go. It's out at Dave's. So we jumped in the car and we drove out there and we looked at it. Oh my word, this car was bad. Oh, stripped. There was almost nothing there. The floor pans were gone. The rear frame was gone. You've seen the pictures if you've been around the channel at all. And I took one look at it and I went, oh, this is absolutely perfect.
Taking on projects that others have deemed beyond repair.
Understand, this was before I was doing YouTube. This sickness has been with me for a lifetime. So we made the deal and made arrangements, and I went and picked the car up and brought it home and started working on it a little bit. And those episodes actually are the very first episodes here on My Car Shop. My rationale for buying a car is usually, is it super cheap? Do I like it? Is there something I can do with it? is it going to be a challenge bigger than the last project I did? And Stitches clicked off all the boxes. The Golden Mullet is another example. I am not in love with a two-door post car. I was just looking for something that I could build a pro mod or a nostalgia drag car out of. And when my buddy John said, hey, what about that Belvedere that I got? I said, that thing is super nerdy. It's super nostalgic. It was definitely a car that not only back in the day, but still today, people would desire to build race cars out of, because as a post car, it's a little stiffer chassis, although that thing is so boned out and rusted out that there's no stiffness to it at all. But it clicked off all the boxes again. I wasn't looking for a 67 Belvedere, and if I was, it certainly wouldn't have been a two-door post. It would have been a two-door hardtop. But it clicked off all the boxes. The price was right. It was completely boned out. It was even worse than Stitches. It was a great candidate. Is this going to be something that will be a great challenge to me, that I can rise to, something that's really going to stretch my abilities and my skills?
Oh, yeah.
What about the Pro Street Dart GTS? Now, first of all, that car was not Pro Street when I got it. I wasn't intending to buy a Dart GTS. I'd already had a 68 Dart, and I liked it, so it wasn't that I had anything against the car. I wasn't even looking for a car when I found that one. I was actually going to Pro Street my 71 340 Demon that I had. It was pretty bad. Not nearly as bad as Stitches, but I didn't have the skills back then that I have now. But anyway, kind of wished I would have kept it. But anyway, so I was looking to Pro Street that car, and a buddy of mine had a narrowed rear end. So I went to his house to look at it, and I said, oh, that's cool. What did you get this for? He said, well, I was going to do this 68 Dart GTS, but I'm just going to get rid of that car. It's a little bit more of a project than I want to do. Next thing you know, because the price was right and it ticked off all the boxes, I decided to buy it, and I loaded it on a trailer and brought it home and started the process of cutting it apart and building a Pro Street car. The price was right. I liked the car. It is a GTS. It's registered with the registry. One of the first couple hundred cars in the registry. I think I'm starting to see a theme here. Pretty much every car that I have it clicks off the same boxes. The 47 Ford is a little different. I said I would talk about that one. I really wanted a fat fender car. When I sold my 31 Ford Model A, car was gorgeous. Sold it to a good friend of mine. I decided that if I was going to sell that car, I was going to replace it with a car that had been on my list. Something that I really wanted. Something that I've always dreamed of having. And lo and behold, a 47 Ford wasn't the car. I was actually looking for a 40. I wanted a 40 sedan. I didn't want a coupe. I wanted a sedan. I like sedans. I hunted high and low for something that I could afford. I didn't want to spend my whole pile of money that I had from selling my 31 Ford. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was enough to get me a good chunk done on a hot rod project. So I looked high and I looked low, and I certainly couldn't find what I was looking for. I happened to be working on my house way up in northern Michigan. Some of you have seen it. It's been on an episode at least once, maybe twice. And I was talking to the neighbor, a guy I've known since I was just a little kid. His name was Johnny. And I was talking with Johnny and saying, he was into old Fords, fat fender stuff, Model A's, Model T's, all that stuff. And he had a bunch of them. And I just mentioned, I would really like to find a fat fender car. I've been looking for a 40 sedan for a long time, and I'm not running across one. He said, what about that 47? What about that 47? I wasn't really looking for a 47, but I certainly liked them. I worked on a 48 sedan just like it when I worked in the hot rod shop way back in the day in college. So I went and looked it over, and, the car was bad, don't get me wrong. Now, it wasn't a basket case like Stitches, but there was definitely some rust in the frame, and the floorboards were shot, and the roof was caved in. And I said, oh, that's perfect. So I went back and talked to him, and I said, what do you want for it? He said, I don't know. How about $500? Sold! It's lucky that the money didn't catch on fire coming out of my hands as I handed it to him. And in fact, I gave him $600 for it, just because I felt like the car was worth a little bit more than what he was asking, and I knew he was giving me a good deal. Now, the special thing about that car is I worked on that car with him when I was a little kid. Well, let me rephrase that. He worked on that car, and I annoyed the hell out of him when I was a little kid. It had a flathead in it. It was a running and driving car, although, it had problems because it had been parked for 30 years or so. But the deal was that he was going to pull the flathead out because it had been rebuilt, and he was going to put that in another car. Well, that's all kinds of stories that are here elsewhere on the channel. If you look at the playlist for the 47 Ford, it's all there in pieces as we're working on the project. But my point in that is that is one of the only times I was out intentionally looking for a specific kind of car. I would have been happy with a 40, 41 I'm not crazy about, 46 not crazy about, 47 if it's a late 47 I like those, 48 definitely, and that would be the cutoff. Because that's just the cutoff where I like those cars. But that's probably the only time in my life where I was intentional for a classic car about going and looking for a specific vehicle. For me, again, the boxes are, is it a super steel? Is it something I have the skills to fix? Is this going to stretch my abilities? Do I actually like the car overall? You see, I'm just not that picky. I just like all kinds of old Mopar muscle. So yes, the Challenger,
The Chally.
Stitches.
is a car that I was really wanting because I had never owned an E-body before. I would have preferred the Cuda, but now that I've owned this car since 2019, I kind of think I like it better than the Barracuda. So, winner, chicken dinner. Well, I hope that answers your questions, Mark. I appreciate the question. Told you I'd circle around to it eventually, and here we are. That's going to do it for this one. We will catch you on another one. I promise. We should. I'll be here. You should too. That'll do it.
Rah!